So I've gotten some pretty bad financial advice in the past. I'm sure you have as well. Some people have been advised to invest in Enron, right? So there's bad advice and things that are out there. Now I've missed out on a lot of the upside of crypto. I've also had a season where I invested a lot in options, ended up losing a lot of money in that investment. I learned it wasn't for me. But again, there are these common things that people tell us about how to invest that I think are just not true. I'm going to go over it in 3 steps. Got a great quote at the end. I think you're going to like it. Please go ahead and smash that like button. It helps other people find this content, and looking forward to sharing this with you. Okay, so the first thing that people say often is don't go into debt, right? You've heard it said, oh, you shouldn't have debt. Debt is bad. Before I get into this, I just want to give you a disclaimer that's telling you that I'm not giving you financial advice here. I have to say this is just my own opinion. This is education. Got to make a quick little disclaimer on that. But people say debt is bad. Well, why do they say that? Because in general, debt is bad, right? If you're going to just go out and buy toys, you're going to buy boats, you're going to buy stuff for your house and cars and all kinds of things, yes, debt is bad. But debt is not some sort of debt monster that's going to come and get you like one of those old, 60s horror movies, like some hideous creature that's going to come up and grab you. There is such thing as good debt. And I think these days, what I'm doing actually is trying to get a lot of cheap debt to be able to go and buy other assets. And what happens is we have this thing called arbitrage, right? You're able to borrow at 1% over here, and then you're able to get a much higher return over here. Now you have to know what you're doing. You have to, obviously do this responsibly. And so I've made some choices on how I do that. But as I've shared this example before, I was able to borrow at 2.75%, a 10-year fixed personal line of credit, which is awesome. I'll take those all day. If any bank people are listening or bankers are listening, I will happily take that all day long.
Show me the money.
But what I was able to do is basically borrow at 2.75%. I'm able to get much, much higher returns, higher double-digit returns and other things and other higher cash flow. So there are situations that make sense to be able to borrow, at least for me. And so when people say, hey, just don't go into debt, don't do it, I think it's really short-sighted. And I think if it's credit card debt or it's other things that you're spending on toys or things you don't need, and it's not borrowing for business or for investment, you have to obviously understand the risks, what can potentially go wrong. But for me, I've found some great ways to make it work. So the second worst piece of financial advice that I think I've ever been given is that single-family investing leads to financial freedom. And I honestly just don't believe that it's true. And I know a lot of you want to fight me on this, and I'm going to get into why I think that's the case. Is over 15 years of experience of both doing single family and being around people that are doing single family, it typically takes a lot of time. There's a lot of energy that goes in, and it's more of a very long-term hold. And you may know people that have become financially free by doing single family. I know them too, but it's typically been sometimes a 5, 10, 20 year or more type of thing. And also it's taking a lot of time, typically a lot of sweat equity. There's been a lot of work, and some of it has to do with timing. Some people get in at the right time, but people that I've talked to, I've had over 1,200 phone calls one-on-one with high net worth individuals. A lot of people own 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 houses. And the people that have more or that become financially free through it, it's typically become a full-time job for them. Even if they have a property manager, it's a lot of work. And you really think about, well, why is that? It's a slow process. You might get $100 to $400 a month. If you can find even a property that can cash flow, it's getting harder and harder in a lot of markets to even find properties that actually cash flow positive. One example of this, the house I live in Pasadena, we have a lot of assets out of state, but in California, it just doesn't make sense. If I were to own this house and put 20% down, I would tie up that capital, and it would basically mean that I'd be spending, somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 a month. But for less than $3,500 a month, I can rent and I can put my money elsewhere. Now, some of you may disagree that that's not the right thing to do, but I'd rather have my money in multifamily assets. It's a much more efficient asset class. The reason why is that, let's say I were to own, 50 houses in this area or in a certain area, I'd have to pay a maintenance guy to come, $50 an hour to come over to a place, diagnose an issue, find out, oh, it's this issue and it's this pipe, in the plumbing. They'd have to go run to Home Depot. They'd have to come back. They'd have to fix that. It could take, a half day or even a full day type of thing, even for one house. And you've got 50 of these. Versus imagine you have a 50-unit apartment complex. It's all central in one place, and typically you have on-site people, you have a lot of similar parts that are there, a lot of similar appliances, and there's a lot more efficiencies that are kind of built into that. So it's something that I see a lot of people doing is really going towards single family, when I think financial freedom really comes through working with larger multifamily. And I've seen it again and again and again where people make that switch. And honestly, we really undervalue our time when it comes to single family. We don't realize that, oh, it's not just even if you're not doing the work, you're getting the phone calls, right? You're getting, hey, what do we do in this situation? What do we do here? You get the headaches. You're hearing about it, even if you're not managing. I had an out-of-state portfolio, single family, and it was a lot of work. So that's some of the worst financial advice that I've heard, is that single family real estate investing leads to financial freedom. All right, so the third piece of financial advice that I've gotten, I've heard this from gurus, I've heard this from friends, I've heard this from family members, is that you should pay your house off early, right? That's just the best thing. Any house you should pay it off early, whether you live there, it's a rental house, you should pay it off early. Well, I'm gonna tell you why this is a terrible idea for most people, right? And it's really one of the worst pieces of advice that I could think of. A lot of people wanna do this because they just don't wanna have a payment. They don't wanna deal with, they just know they've got this kind of, paid for outright. There are some risks with that, you could get sued. There are people that go around and search for people that have assets with no loans on them, which sounds crazy, but it's just the fact of kind of where we are today. So some risk there. But maybe you just wanna pay your house off because it gives you peace of mind, right? Knowing that, hey, no matter what, I've got this house paid off. I really don't have to worry about it. But the challenge is today, we're seeing 3% interest rates, or give or take a little bit, 3%. We've never really seen interest rates this low. Now, if you were to say you owed $500,000 on your house, I'm assuming because I live in California, but maybe you live in Arkansas and that's high, whatever your number is, adjust. You owe $500,000 on a house, and you take that, you have the cash and you put it in and you pay the house off completely. Again, you still owe taxes each year, you still have insurance, you still have other expenses with your property, but you don't have a payment. What you've done is you've basically gotten a 3% return on your money, right? Because that's the opportunity cost. You're basically, down the road, you'd be paying 3% interest for the next 30 years or however long you have on your mortgage. But by you paying it down now, you're basically locking in that 3% return. You're like, oh, that's not too bad. Well, I will say this, if inflation, at least at the time of this video, is 6, 7, 8, 9%, and who knows what it actually really is, it's higher than what's being reported. So if it's higher, you're actually losing money substantially by doing that. Versus putting it in other investments where there is some inflation hedge. We're seeing investments such as multifamily, self-storage, there's other types of investments, other types of syndicated deals that are outside of Wall Street that we're seeing 10 to 20% annualized returns, which is amazing. Now, if that's shocking to you or that's just seems unbelievable to you, it's important that you take some time and you educate yourself, because paying down your home is not necessarily the best way for a lot of people to go. So I did a whole video on this. If you want to see more in detail, check it out up here. But anyway, those are the three things, the three worst pieces of financial advice I feel like I was given. I wanted to share this quote with you from one of my heroes, Warren Buffett, and he says, "Price is what you pay, and value is what you get." Price is what you pay, and value is what you get. I really hope you got some value out of this video. And if you made it this far, consider subscribing. I'd love to know in the comments below, what's the worst piece of financial advice that you've ever received? So stick that down there. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.